Ahoy there matey, and welcome to my channel. My name is Liberty, and today I will be starting what will become a new series, a quest to find the best queer YA romance out there. It's a hard task, but I'm ready for the challenge. I will be searching high and low in the depths of booktube and bookstagram, and also just books that I think look cool in the shop, because frankly I just can't resist buying books. But anyway, these books are queer, these books are cute, these books make me happy, and I usually read them in like maybe one sitting, but that's not to say that they are often good. There is sometimes some issues with, how shall I put this, plot, pacing, dialogue, characterization. These may not be the most literary of books, but they bring me joy. And so today I'm going to be trying to find the ones that bring me the most joy, but also are well written. It's a challenge. It's a challenge, I know. Now, these are the kind of books that I am quite a fan of reading when it's term time and I'm stressed, and just what I need is something light, easy, fun, quick. So it's either a queer YA romance or a crime thriller. Slightly different ends of the fast spectrum. I have also decided that I'm going to do this in a challenge format. What are these things called? You know, when there's like football and people get all like obsessed over working out who's going to progress through the levels. What's it called? A league table? No, that seems wrong. I genuinely don't know. I'm going to have to look this up. Hang on a moment. Aha! They are called tournament brackets, apparently. And if I have actually managed to work out the graphic design element, here we are. Now, as you can see, I have many an option, but I have already read quite a few of these. Yes, it really is just as simple as the fact that I have read quite a few of these in the last couple of years in my lifetime. So I will be including ones I've already read. I will just have a little battle system going on. One I've already read, one I am newly reading. Put them head to head, see which one fares better, and then we will eventually find the one and only best queer YA romance out there. Now, here's the thing. There are several levels that these books will be rated on. Not literally, but just part of what goes into my judgment criteria, if you will. How diverse the characters are, how interesting the plotline is, how well the plot and characters develop, and also whether it makes me happy. So if it ends up being like two white boys having a coming out drama, I might not be so impressed as, say, Loveless by Alice Oseman, which literally tore me in half. So I won't call myself a connoisseur of the queer YA romance genre, but I will say that I have a bit of experience gathering inspiration for my little tournament bracket thing. And what are these recommendations? Has it become 2014 again? Sorry, what is this? I didn't realise it was still purely cis white gay era. This isn't even good grammar. Just scrolling through my Storygraph to be read pile for inspiration. Okay, I'm actually losing my mind. I have filled in a whole bunch of this tournament bracket, but I frankly don't have the will to live anymore. And also, you know, just to put some logic in that, let's be honest, not all the possible best queer YA romances have come out yet. So it's only sensible to leave some of the slots blank. Many of the slots blank, perhaps. They can be filled in later, when more fantastic content has arisen. This is what I'm telling myself anyway. Back to future me in the studio. Oh dear, I'm kind of blending in with the sofa. Oh well, I can't be bothered to change, so we're just going to keep going. Right, so I will be starting with Perfect on Paper by Sophie Gonzalez. As you can see, I'm reading it on my Kindle because I'll be honest, the majority of the time I do get romances in ebook form instead of in print because first of all, they're cheaper, and second of all, I'm unlikely to reread romances. The majority of these will probably be via Kindle, but we'll see. Perfect on Paper by Sophie Gonzalez is a story about a bisexual girl who runs a romantic advice service at her school, obviously anonymously, and she gets found out by this guy who then asks her to help him get back with his ex. But of course, chaos ensues, and as far as I understand it, she will be accidentally also falling in love with the girl or the guy or both or something. I'm not really sure. The point is, it sounds like shenanigans will happen and I'm involved. I like it already. I'm literally only about like 20 pages in, but loving it so far. Hello. I've now finished Perfect on Paper by Sophie Gonzalez, and I have some thoughts to give you. I thought that book was really brilliant. I ended up rating it 4 stars, which is very high for me for a romance because often I like them and I appreciate them, but there's nothing really substantial to the storyline or the plot, and it's kind of an in one ear, out the other kind of situation. So usually rated in the region of 3 stars. But this one, I thought, it was just put together so well and it was so interesting. I actually learned some things myself from the book. It was interspersed with fact and theory in relationship therapy, I guess. I mean, I genuinely learned things from this book, things like attachment styles. I appreciated the fact that this book was so clearly advocating for healthy relationships, healthy communication. You could really see that, not just in the way that it disseminates information, in a very kind of well done way, by the way. It's weaved into the narrative very fluently without kind of that clunky feeling you get sometimes when you can tell a book is just trying to like tell the reader something, but it's like actually you've just got a person speaking it because you can't work out how to get it into the narrative otherwise. You know what I mean? So it wasn't quite the half of it style, you know, beautiful little romance kind of story where the main character is tasked with getting a guy with a girl but then falls for the girl and it's all very dramatic. Turns out it wasn't that, but in some ways I think it was better because yes, the main character Darcy runs an anonymous sort of relationship help thing in her school, but in fact when she gets found out by the guy and he's trying to get back with his ex-girlfriend, actually along the way he becomes the romantic interest for Darcy, whereas she starts the book in love with her best friend, a girl called Brooke. Honestly, the whole kind of formula was not quite what I was expecting, but in fact that just opened the door for a lot of really interesting discussion of bisexuality within the queer community and how there is this kind of underlying feeling of invalidation as soon as a bi person gets in a relationship that may appear sort of heterosexual from the outside, a straight passing relationship, if you will. And there's a feeling of invalidation, not just within themselves, but within a lot of queer spaces. And so I thought that discussion was very interesting. And actually it kind of challenged me because when it started transpiring, when Darcy, the main character, sort of starts getting attracted to and seemingly kind of interested in the main guy called Broham, I began to kind of think, oh, this isn't what I was expecting. This isn't a queer romance. But of course it is. That's the point. The main character is bisexual. So for just a millisecond there, I definitely fell into the trap that the book then really carefully explores, which I thought was very, very well done. It really forced me to sort of challenge my own misconception there, which was really good. It had brilliant queer representation, and it wasn't just sort of that one major arc, like I said, of what does bisexuality mean, bisexuality in the queer community. It also had a dedicated school club that Darcy goes to, in which you get this little sort of microcosm of the queer community. You have an NB person, you have aro ace people, you have gay people, lesbians. I also loved Darcy's sister called Ainsley, I think, who is a trans woman, and it's really kind of tangible the way that sort of, again, queer people kind of coalesce around queer people. Other notes I have, let me look in my trusty reading journal. Oh yes, here's an interesting one. I love the fact that the third act conflict, which for some reason every romance book has to have, we can get further into that another time. But really interestingly, the third act conflict wasn't between Darcy, the main character, and her love interest, the guy called Brougham. Because often, in fact, usually, that conflict is actually just a result of miscommunication and people who just don't know how to communicate, who are going into relationships and acting really toxic, basically. And it's just really frustrating and often just like actually kind of ruins the story, and especially ruins any sort of love story, because I'm reading these things and I'm like, you're clearly not made for each other if you can't just get your thoughts across and listen to one another, you know? But the point is, in this book, that conflict wasn't the case. In fact, the conflict was between Darcy and her best friend, Brooke, the one that she was in love with originally, and the one who, it turns out, she has betrayed in quite a tangible way. It's quite horrifying, actually. The kind of mistake that you can see so clearly, because it's the kind of mistake that makes perfect sense for teenagers, not to excuse it, but it follows so well. But I think it adds something really interesting to the characterization of Darcy, the main character, because she's not wholly good. She has that slight moral greyness where she's made this bad mistake, but you're still kind of on her side. You still understand where she's coming from, and it adds a layer of complexity to the whole dynamic, which I think is also one of the reasons the book is so strong. It's not just, you know, flat pack characters who fall in love. It's really interesting. However, that does lead me on to possibly the one more significant gripe I did have with this book, which was that the third act conflict gets resolved in a way I didn't think was very realistic. I kind of thought, wow, if your best friend did that to you, and I won't say what, but if your best friend did that to you, it would take a bit more than the kind of apology that Darcy gives to kind of to forgive in a way that would make you be friendly, let alone like best friends with again. It felt to me like a slight plot drop where, you know, the author couldn't quite work out how to, in a short enough time, like demonstrate them becoming friends again, so she decides to just do it all in one with this kind of big dramatic gesture. So anyway, in conclusion, I thought Perfect on Paper was genuinely one of the better romances I've ever read. So that's kind of, it's high on the list. So you've heard my thoughts on Perfect on Paper. I thought it was excellent. I gave it 4 stars, as you know. But it is time to compare it to Cinderella is Dead by Kalynn Bayron, I think. This is one that I read last year sometime, and I read it, you know, really quickly, all in one sitting or 2, I think. But I did not think it was great. I only gave it 2.5 stars because I really... 2.5? Let me check. Oh, it's fine. Okay, so I've just looked at my Storygraph review through it. Turns out I actually gave it 1.5 stars, so that's even worse than I remembered. I must have been genuinely quite upset in an angry way by the book to giving it that low, but here we are. The only note I put is, they tried, but honestly there wasn't enough depth in any direction. Which I actually remember, because the problem with this book for me is that they had a good idea, you know, it's oh, I should summarise what it's about. God, I don't even remember what it's about. This is the problem. Like, really the only things that have stood out to me are like the things I thought were annoying about it. I don't really remember much about the storyline as a whole. And I know that that's difficult because a lot of people really loved this book. Like, it was really well spoken of, at least when it came out. And I appreciate the fact that it was also very popular because it had a black queer woman as the main character, and that it had, you know, a sapphic relationship. All these things, I was like, I'm so there for it. That's why I read the book. And then it was just like thoroughly disappointing. It's this fantasy world where the girl, what's her name? Right, the main girl is called Sophia. That took me some searching. If that was done because Sophia means wise, I'm gonna riot. It's actually at the extent I need to look at the about section just to find out what this book is about. I've forgotten. It's a fantasy world with extreme misogyny and a patriarchal system where all the women have to be lined up for the wealthy men of the city to basically just like choose them for marriage, and it's like, you know, described as being like traded like cattle. And yes, horrifying. Literally the descriptions of the men kind of just like lusting over these 16-year-old girls. Blech, hated it. But the thing is, I bin you, you know? For me personally, a story has to have a little bit more depth than just being about sexism. Like, there's obviously a place for that, and there's a lot of really interesting things that can be said about that. It wasn't even a well-plotted story. It wasn't even a well-drawn story. It's like how the whole book opens with Sophia, the main character, being in love with her best friend, and like this best friend is really toxic about it, obviously, but this is also a situation where queer relationships are pretty much hidden, right? It starts with her being in love with her best friend, who's also a girl. But then literally as soon as she meets the secondary main character, the love interest, she's all like, oh my god, she's so hot. I love her hair. The way she stands in front of a fireplace is so hot. And I'm just like, you literally just said 5 minutes ago that you're deeply in love with your best friend and you have been for years and you never will be apart from her. Like, chill out a second. And also, the way that whole part happened, I mean, from what I remember, basically she just randomly meets this woman like in a garden she's already broken into, and then this woman takes her on this like adventure, and then she just gets told all these like, you know, basically alternative histories, because it turns out this woman is like the descendant of the original Cinderella or whatever. Like, what are the chances? And not even in an interesting fantasy way, it's more just like, this literally doesn't make any sense. This doesn't make any sense. This is just contrived bullshit, and I really didn't like it. that was my whole feeling. I was just like, what is going on? There is no construction. There is no ample plot here in a way that makes sense. The whole end bit where she like breaks into the castle and frees all the wretched women in the basement. What is also going on there? It was just so weird. It was just so weird, and I thought it was rubbish. And I gave it 1.5 stars. And I have to say, I really, really rarely give books even like 2 stars. To go less than that is a display of my dislike. Which is all to say that I definitely think Perfect on Paper wins this round.
Dreamstory.com audio.
I mean, I think I might have been obvious by the way I started by saying I really didn't like Cinderella is Dead. But that's the truth. Here we are. And definitely thought that Perfect on Paper was superior, and just a far better read in every way. Even if it didn't have as good like racial diversity, it definitely had better storytelling, queer diversity, plot, and characters. They just didn't make sense. It just didn't make sense in Cinderella is Dead. I really don't understand what people thought about, like, why people thought that was so great. I really just don't. And here we are. And I will now put Perfect on Paper in its rightful place as the winner of this part of the tournament, in its tournament bracket bit. And you will see in the next episode what that looks like. So I hope you will join me next time comparing another 2 queer YA romances and seeing what I think about them. I can tell you, because I've already filmed it, that it's another good episode, and I really hope that you come along for the ride. But thank you very much for joining me today, and I really hope you have a good rest of your day. Goodbye everyone!